Good morning. Here we are on a snowy day in Missouri, reading Genesis chapter 29 and 30. Genesis 29 and 30 will begin in 29, verse 1. Then Jacob hurried and finally arrived in the land of the east. 2. He saw a well in the distance, 3 flocks of sheep and goat laid in the open field beside it, waiting to be watered. But a heavy stone covered the mouth of the well. 3. It was the custom there to wait for all the flocks to arrive before removing the stone and watering the animals. Afterwards, the stone would be placed back on the mouth of the well, for Jacob went over to the shepherd and asked, "Where are you from, my friend?" "We are from Haran," they answered. 5. "Do you know a man named Laban, the grandson of Nahor?" he asked. "Yes, we do," they replied. 6. "This is he doing well?" Jacob asked. "Yes, he's well," they answered. "Look, here comes his daughter Rachel with their flock now." 7. Jacob said, "Look, it's a small broad daylight, too early to round up animals. Why don't you water the sheep and goats so they can get back to the pasture?" 8. "We can't water the animal until all the flocks have arrived," they replied. Then the shepherds moved the stone from the mouth of the well, and we water all the sheep and the goats. 9. Jacob was still talking with them when Rachel arrived with her father's flocks, for she was a shepherd. 10. And because Rachel was his own cousin, the daughter of Laban, his mother's blood, and because the sheep and goats belonged to her uncle Laban, Jacob went over to the well, moved the stone from the mouth of the water, and watered his uncle's flocks. 11. Then Jacob kissed Rachel, and he wept aloud. 7. He explained to Rachel that he was her cousin on his father's side and the son of his aunt Rebekah. So Rachel quickly ran and told Laban, her father Laban. 13. As soon as Laban heard that his nephew Jacob had arrived, he ran out to meet him. He embraced and kissed him and brought him home. When Jacob told him his story, Laban explained, You really are my own flesh and blood." After Jacob had stayed with Laban for about a month, 15, Laban said to him, "You should work for me without pay just because you are a relative. Tell me how much your wage should be." 16. Now Laban had 2 daughters. The older one was named Leah, and the younger one was Rachel. 17. There was no spark in Leah's eyes, but Rachel had a beautiful figure and a lovely face. 18. Since Jacob was in love with Rachel, he told her father, "I will work for you for 7 years if you will give me Rachel, your youngest daughter, to be my wife, as my wife." 19. "Agreed," Laban replied. "I'd rather give her to you than anyone else. Stay at work for me." 20. So Jacob worked 7 years to pay off Rachel. But his love for her was so strong that it seemed for him but a few days. 21. Finally, the time came for him to marry her. "I fulfilled my agreement," Jacob said to Laban. "Now give me my wife so I can sleep with her." Typical response of any man, right? 23. So Laban invited everyone in the neighborhood to prepare a wedding feast. 23. But that night, when it was dark, Laban took Leah to Jacob and he slept with her. 24. Laban gave Leah the servant Zephael to be her maid. 25. But when Jacob woke in the morning, it was Leah. "What have you done to me?" Jacob raged at Laban. I worked 7 years for Rachel. Why are you tricking me? I want you to notice that little point right there. Why are you tricking me? Laban was about that kind of thing. And we're going to see later that that comes back to haunt him. 26. It's not our custom here to marry off the younger daughter ahead of the firstborn, Laban replied. But wait until the bridal week is over, then we'll give you Rachel to provide you a promise to, provided you promise to work another 7 years for me. 28. Jacob agreed to work 7 more years. A week after Jacob had married Leah, Laban gave him Rachel too. Laban gave Rachel a servant, Bahel, to be her maid. So Jacob slept with Rachel too, and he loved her much more than Leah. He then stayed and worked for Laban an additional 7 years. Now let's look what happens. 31. When the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, he enabled her to have children, but Rachel did not conceive. So 32. So Leah became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She named him Rehoboam, for she said, the Lord has noticed my misery and now my husband will love me. 33. She soon became pregnant again and gave birth to another son. She named him Samson, for she said, the Lord heard that I was unloved and has given me another son. 34. Then she became pregnant a third time and gave birth to a son, and she named him Levi. For she said, surely this time my husband will feel affection for me, since I've given him 3 sons. So you see, the love hadn't changed, but these sons keep coming out and keep being born. And we're going to see that the tribes, as soon we're going to see the 12 tribes of Israel coming from Jacob here and carrying on. The Levite, remember, these are the guys that become the priests in the temple. And so they all come back here to this wife that wasn't loved. But God blessed her. 35. Once again, Leah became pregnant and gave birth to another son. She named him Judah, for she said, now I will praise the Lord. And then she stopped having children. And so we see these 4 came from Leah. Now, let's look into chapter 30. When Rachel saw that she wasn't having children for Jacob, she became jealous of her sister. She pleaded with Jacob, give me children or I'll die. 2. Then Jacob became furious with Rachel. Am I God? He asked. He's the one who has kept you from having children. 3. Then Rachel told him, take my maid Bilhah and sleep with her. She will bear children for me, and through her I can have a family too. Have we not seen this happen before? Remember with Abraham, when his wife Sarai couldn't have a child, and she gave him her maidservant, and he had Ishmael, and the problem that was caused all through that union and relationship. And so we see history repeating itself again here in the same family line. So, verse 5. So Rachel gave him 4. So Rachel gave him Bilhah to Jacob as a wife, and he slept with her. 5. Bilhah became pregnant and presented him a son. Rachel named the son Dan. For she said, God has vindicted me. He has heard my request and given me a son. And so she now adopts his son as its her own, though it is not. And we do see this a lot through scripture. And it's very important that even those that were born outside, or those halves, once they're accepted into the family, they're wholly into the family. There's no distinction anymore as far as that goes. Dan becomes part of the 12 tribes. Even though there's this wife that isn't of the line, but because she's Jacob's wife, that makes it part of the family. And so let's then continue on. Rachel named him Dan, remember. For she said, God has vindicated me. He has heard my request and given me a son. 7. Then Bilhah became pregnant again and gave Jacob a second son. Rachel named him Naphtali, and she said, I struggled hard with my sister, and I am winning. 9. Meanwhile, Leah realized that she wasn't getting pregnant anymore, so she took her servant, Zilpah, and gave her to Jacob as his wife. 10. Soon Zilpah presented him with a son. Leah named him Gad, and she said, how fortunate I am. 12. Then Zilpah gave Jacob a second son, and Leah named him Asher. For she said, what joy is mine, how the other women will celebrate with me. 14. One day, during the wheat harvest, Reuben found some mandarin groves in the field and brought them to his mother. Rachel begged Leah, please give me some of your son's mandarins. 15. But Leah arguably replied, wasn't it enough for you to steal my husband? Now you want to steal my son's mandarins too? Rachel answered, I will let Jacob sleep with you tonight if you have me some of the mandarins. 16. So that evening, Jacob was coming home from the field. Leah went out to meet him. You must come to the sheep and sleep with me tonight, she said. I have paid for you with some mandarins, and my son had found. So that night he slept with Leah, and God answered Leah's prayer, and she became pregnant again and gave birth to the fifth son from Jacob. 18. She named him Ishkar, for she said, God has rewarded me for giving my servant to my husband as a wife. 19. Then Leah became pregnant again and gave birth to a sixth son named Jacob. 20. She named him a sixth son for Jacob. She named him Zilpah, for she said, God has given me a good reward. Now my husband will treat me with respect, for I have given him 6 sons. Later, she gave a daughter and named her Diane. Then God remembered Rachel's plight and answered her prayer by enabling her to have children. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son. God has removed my disgrace, she said, and she named him Joseph for her. She said, may the Lord add yet another son in my family. 25. Soon after Rachel had given birth to Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, please release me so I can go home to my own country. 26. Let me take my wives and children, for I have earned them and served you, and let me be on my way. You certainly know how hard I have worked for you. 27. Please listen to me, Laban replied. I have become wealthy, for the Lord has blessed me because of you. 28. Tell me how much I owe you. Whatever it is, I'll pay it. 29. Jacob replied, you know how hard I've worked for you, and how your flock and herds have grown under my care. 30. You had little indeed before I came, but your wealth has increased enormously. The Lord has blessed you through everything I have done. But now, what about me? When can I start providing for my own family? 31. What wage do you want? Laban asked again. Jacob replied, don't give me anything. Just do this one thing, and I will continue to tend and watch your flock. 32. Now, listen carefully what happens here. Let me inspect your flock today and remove all the sheep and goats that are speckled or spotted, along with all the black sheep. Give these to me as my wage. 33. In the future, when you check on animals you have given me as my wage, you will see that I have been honest. If you find any in my flock and any goats without speckles or spots or any sheep that are not black, you will know that I have stolen them from you. Verse 34. All right, Laban replied, it will be as you say. 25. But that very day, Laban went out and removed the male goats that were speckled, all the female goats that were speckled and spotted or had white patches, and all the black ones. He placed them in the care of his own son, 36, who took them 3 days' journey from where Jacob was. Meanwhile, Jacob stayed in the care for the rest of Laban's flock, 37. Now, I want you to see what happened there. He took them all out. He decided to trick Jacob and takes them away from him and hides them. 37. Then Jacob took some fresh berries from a popular almond and plant tree and peeled a strip of bark, making white streaks on them. 28. Then he placed these peeled branches in the water trough where the flocks came to drink, for that was where they mated. 39. And when they mated in front of the white speckled branches, they gave birth to young that were speckled and spotted. 40. Jacob separated the lambs from Laban's flocks, and in a matter of time he turned the flocks to face Laban's animals were streaked or black. This is how he built his own flock instead of increasing Laban's. 41. However, the stronger females were ready to mate. Jacob would face and peel branches in the watering trough in front of them. Then they would mate in front of the branches. 42. But he didn't do this with the weaker ones. So the weaker lambs belonged to Laban and the stronger ones, Jacob. 43. As a result, Jacob became very wealthy with large flocks of sheep and goats and females and male servants and many camels and donkeys. Because someone tried to cheat him, he did what was fair and right, and then he tricks Laban as well. But God blessed him. God blessed him because of a promise that God gave him. And so we can rest assured that when God promises us something, it will be as he says. All throughout the New Testament, God has given us some great and precious promises. Of course, one of my favorite that I often talk about in 2 Peter 3, 1, 3 through 10, I think it is, where he says, I've given you everything you need to overcome the evil desires of this world through my precious promises. He has given us victory to live in our lives. And I hope today you found that victory. I hope that this story has been interesting as you see how God's people begin to grow, because that's what these are. These are the children of Israel, the 12 tribes that ultimately will go into the promised land in the book of Joshua, that will spread out. And they really, at that time, are the church. They're the church of God that's beginning to spread out and head out into the world, as we see God's promise to Abraham, saying that eventually his son, who was Isaac, would have a son, and they would be as numerous as the stars in the sky and the seas. And that's what we're beginning to see, this process spreading out of the promise of fulfillment from God. I hope you take time, look at the promises of God, take time to rest in the promises of God, take time to trust and believe in them. God bless you. Have a great day.